So I put up there the objectives set out in the WSP report for the Milton and Histon roads. And I've underlined and highlighted in red some of the things that I think need some consideration. The very first thing is to provide comprehensive priority for buses. And this has really set the agenda for the entire set of proposals. We've also got, wherever possible, a provision for cyclists along Milton Road. And I think that's too weak. I think actually cycling has a lot more potential to remove traffic off Milton Road. We've also got to generate options capable of maintaining traffic levels. Well, we already accept that the traffic levels are too high at peak already. So maintaining the traffic levels is not enough. We actually have to reduce peak traffic levels. And they have to consider potential for enhancing the environment. I'm sorry, considering potential is very, very weak. And merely to assess the impact on existing residents really is making no commitment whatsoever to take into account your interests. And those objectives led to this: 20 metres of tarmac edge to edge. And I'm sorry, I cannot imagine anywhere within a city where that would be an acceptable form of place setting.
It's called Newmarket Road. We all know how common it is.
Indeed. So why don't we start with a plan to eliminate congestion? Let's start with that. Now, to do that, we need to reduce peak traffic flow by 20%. Now, why 20%? Because that's the difference between stationary traffic, gridlock traffic, and free-flowing traffic. Busy but free-flowing. Now, you will all have noticed the difference between term time and holiday time. That the traffic feels like it's greatly reduced during the holiday times. Some people estimate it's 40% lower. It's not. It's measured as between 5 and 15%. It's actually a lot more manageable than you might perceive, this problem. If we manage to reduce the peak traffic flow and eliminate congestion, we actually don't need bus lanes. Because if you'll observe, the buses don't use the bus lanes most of the day. And if we remove the bus lanes, then we have the scope to really improve the streetscape. And as a byproduct of this, by reducing the peak traffic flow, we also meet objectives in lowering environmental impact. That's pollution, air pollution, noise pollution, and carbon footprint. And all of those are important, and all those are very much objectives for the City Council. So this is what I would say we should start with as the ideal road profile. And this is set this can be fit within 16.4 metres. Now 20 metres is what the consultants have set as their target along Milton Road, but as any of you who know Milton Road, that cannot be achieved all the way along. There are a number of points where it's narrower than that, and they're proposing compulsory purchase in people's gardens in order to acquire the 20 metres. But that's to acquire 20 metres of tarmac edge to edge. Now this can be tweaked and it can be adapted to various points along the road. So where we need a lay-by bus stop, if there's enough, we need 19.1 metres in order to accommodate that. And if there isn't the space for a lay-by bus stop, well, we can widen the lane sufficiently so that a car behind the bus can at least see past to see whether it's clear to overtake. A problem that we're seeing on Hills Road is that because it's 3 metres, which is actually only fractionally wider than the bus itself, a vehicle behind simply cannot see whether it's clear to overtake. And it might be pointed out, although vehicles in this country can only be 2.6 metres wide, that's not including the wing mirrors. And if you see, let's say, a cement mixer coming down, the chances are that will be very close to 3 metres. I mean, there is one that is 2.95 metres. So they come head to head, and they have to drive very, very carefully. And then at a junction, we need 18.6 metres in order to accommodate a right filter lane. And still keep the segregated cycle lane. So how do we reduce the congestion? How do we reduce the 20%? How do we take that out? Well, we can start with improving traffic flow. Smart traffic management is basically upgrading and integrating all of the traffic signals so that they all work together, so that actually you get what's called a green wave going through the city, that the lights are all coordinated. And also that they adapt as issues arise, as congestion moves to different places. If there is an event, an accident on the A14, and suddenly there's an inrush of traffic on a particular radial road, the computer that manages the lights will instantly switch into a program that is already set up to deal with that scenario, and it immediately starts dispersing the traffic as efficiently as possible. We can also make modifications to junctions and bus stops. Now, everyone with local knowledge can very quickly rattle off a few points along Milton Road where the congestion is caused by a poor layout on the road, a poorly positioned bus stop, a junction that is not optimally designed. And now these are things that can be, just taking one very obvious example. If you look at this, you'll be able to see that there's the yellow hatching marks a bus, the marking of a bus stop here. And if you look really, really closely, you might be able to see that the vehicle that stopped on the bus stop is not in fact a bus. Because what's actually needed here is a loading bay. And the bus stop needs to be further back in the car parking lay-by in front of the shops. Now, those sorts of all those sorts of modifications and access term restrictions, some of those modifications are really obvious. Some of them can be experimented with, and Councillor Manning will be talking after me about how some of these things can be trialled in such a way that you can experience what the effects are. Because your intuitions and even the road traffic engineers' models can be very wrong about these things. And particularly when you make more than one modification, how they interact is incredibly difficult to predict. So it's really important that we, wherever possible, try it out and experience it. And Michael Page did this very little, created a slide here that shows how the effect of these right turn bans that are being proposed will lead the traffic to follow the rat runs, which are already used, but will become very much more heavily used. And as Claire mentioned earlier, an obvious thing that we could look to do is staggering the start times for schools, shops and businesses. There is a degree of flexibility, and you may have seen programs about how secondary school pupils should really be starting school later in the day, starting at 10 o'clock. Well, why don't we? Certainly shops, some shops could start later and stay open till a bit later. And businesses could just be a bit more flexible about when their employees work. Now I'm going to talk to you about something which I think could make a really big difference. It doesn't solve the problem, but it provides a really useful tool for controlling congestion. It's what we call inbound flow control. Now looking at Milton Road, from the Science Park Junction through to Mitcham's Corner is 2.5 kilometres. Now if that was gridlocked, we'd need to take out 20% of the traffic in order to get it moving again. Now another way we might achieve that is if we could stretch the road by 20%. And that would open up the gaps between the vehicles enough for them to be able to flow again. Now stretching it by 20% means adding 500 metres. Could we find 500 metres for those cars before Science Park Junction? Well, yes we could. In fact, that section of road is actually very wide. And there's a large central reservation right down the middle of it. It's 500 metres long, 580 metres long, and it's 26 metres wide. Now it currently has standard 3.65 metre lanes, 3 inbound, 3 outbound, and it has a speed limit of 50 miles an hour. Well, if we reduce the lane width to 3.2 metres and reduce the speed limit and reduce the central reservation, we could actually accommodate 8 lanes there. That would actually provide us with 1,300 metres of additional road. We only needed 500, but one of the advantages of actually going for more is that we already have a problem with traffic backing up to the A14. And if it backs up onto the slip roads and you start having stationary cars at the bottom of the slip ramp, that's incredibly dangerous. We have to address that. And this would address it without actually touching the A14. The buses would use the leftmost lane coming in, and that lane would be exclusively for access to Cowley Road. So all traffic that's going into the St John's Innovation Park into the Cambridge Business Park would use that lane, along with the buses. The private traffic would disperse very quickly, so it wouldn't hold up the buses. And it would go in through the dogleg through Milton, through Cowley Road, and come out ahead of the traffic lights at the Science Park junction. We would also, so we'd have to re-engineer that island in order to provide a through route for the buses. We'd also relocate this bus stop, which at the moment is on Milton Road, and clearly contributes to congestion, because if a bus stops there and unloads people, then it's holding up the traffic behind it. So we'd move that bus stop onto the end of Cowley Road, just before the point where it re-merges with Milton Road. And that bus stop is actually within 6-7 minutes walking distance at the furthest point of the Science Park. So it's perfectly possible for people to walk from there across the pedestrian crossing that we would propose here, and then across Milton Road and into the Science Park or the Cambridge Business Park. Now that was the easy stuff. That's the stuff that doesn't require us to change our behaviour or our habits. The other thing we have to do is we have to reduce the demand, because there is a limit on the amount of traffic the city can cope with. The central city we can't dual carriage the inner ring road. We can't create any more capacity within the city centre. So that means we have to reduce the peak demand, and we have to hold it there permanently. And that's a big ask. So how do we achieve that? Well, one thing we can do is we can make it a lot easier for people to take the bus into the city. And that means building park and ride sites throughout the region, not just around the edge of the city, but in places like Camborne, in places like Northstowe, in places like Waterbeach, Haverhill, places where large numbers of people are travelling, and also groups of village. Hardwick could do with one, Cottenham could do with one. And the idea is that this is a point which has proper services, has a shelter, has toilets, has secure cycle racks, has car parking, has a set down and pick up area, maybe even has a kiosk selling coffee. And if we have these networked around the region, it makes it a hell of a lot more attractive for people to come by bus. We also need to phase up free commuter parking. At the moment, it's really, really clear, particularly now that there's a £1 charge on the park and ride sites, that it is hugely distorting it's a hugely distorting incentive if people can drive into the city and park for free. We actually have to make it so that if you are coming into the city, you either use a park and ride site, or you go to a paid parking site. And that will affect you, and that means that you, if you currently park on the road, then that will either mean you have to have a residence parking scheme, or if you don't park on the road, then you'll need parking restrictions on the road for visitors and engineers or whatever are coming to visit service to avoid that. We need to figure this out citywide. There's no use doing it in one little patch that just pushes the problem a little bit further. We also need to restrict the traffic on the inner ring road. The inner ring road is already pretty critical, and it's going to become even more critical. We've calculated that between 250 and 300 buses per hour will be arriving in the city centre by 2031. If those buses are not to all be gridlocked in the middle of the city, we really have to remove as much traffic as possible from the inner ring road. And that really means introducing points along the ring road where private vehicles cannot go through. The buses can, cycles can, but not other motor vehicles. We need to do a lot more to encourage walking and cycling, and that means making it more attractive, educating people about where they can, how they can walk and cycle to places that are along safe routes, and really doing just more to educate people about the alternatives and encouraging them for health reasons as much as for anything else to walk and cycle more. We need to make the bus services more attractive. I mean, this ties in with providing the park and ride sites, but those bus services, they need to be express services. They don't need to be winding through the back streets of all the villages on the route. and they need to connect with other services really easily. If you're coming in from Camborne, you can change to a bus service that takes you to the Science Park, or to Addenbrooke's, or to the Marshall business area. And I mean, when you talk to people about why they don't take the bus, it's because the journey that they can do by car takes 20 minutes. When they try to do it by bus, it takes an hour and a half. And finally, we need to run more train services. There's a huge untapped potential in the rail network, particularly east of Cambridge. The Newmarket line could carry hugely more people into the city. If there was a station that served Fulbourn, Tavistock and Cherry Hinton, and we also had a station at Addenbrooke's, that would mean all those people in 20,000 houses in the Fulbourn area would be able to get to Addenbrooke's Hospital without getting in a car. That would make a huge difference to the volume of traffic that's trying to get through the city. And really what I would conclude with on that is that although some of those measures are going to mean that you have to change your habits and will change the way that you live, we will all have to walk more, we will all have to cycle more, we'll all have to take the bus, and we will all have to drive only when it's actually necessary, not just when it's slightly more convenient. And that's good for us, that's good for our health, it's good for the city, and it's good for the planet. So thank you.
Indeed, we are running quite long. 3 questions, please. Right at the back, please, Richard.
Thank you. There was a very interesting article in The Guardian this morning on bus regulation, deregulation, and it talked about the level of satisfaction in certain cities in Britain. And I think it was Nottingham, it was 92%, and in East Lothian or West Lothian, I can't remember which, it was 96%. And my question is what is the level of satisfaction of the bus service in Cambridge? And there seemed to be a very strong correlation between level of satisfaction and regulation. And I wonder if this topic should actually be included. I know that the council who said we don't want to set up a bus company, but I fear, I mean, I know very little about this. In fact, this morning I was on a bus in London and it was wonderful on one of these brand new buses. It was very stylish. And yet the article this morning said that anyone using a bus over 30 has failed in life. Well, that's dreadful, isn't it? And I fear that this regulation, deregulation word should actually be a very strong part of the debate.
No. There was regulation in the Queen's speech specifically on empowering local councils, local authorities to have more control over how to allow them to franchise bus services. Unfortunately, it's conditional on having an elected mayor, and we're some steps away from having that. But I think from memory, the quality of life survey that Cambridge Ahead did about satisfaction with buses, I think it was about 56%. So it was not high. And it is very clear that a lot needs to be done to improve the quality and reliability of services. And it is not just about the reliability in terms of the time lost due to congestion on radial roads. It's about the whole service. It's the door-to-door journey experience that really matters. We need to look at.
Other questions? Yes, please. And then.
I found that very enlightening, thank you very much. As we've got some representatives of the City Deal here, some members from the board I believe, I just wondered what their response to be. What do they find wrong with that presentation?
I think that's a fascinating question. Come and ask it on the 4th of February, because I don't think that you would expect Edward to answer that. Over there.
Just a quick point about the first part. I agree with the second part about holding back traffic and allowing it to flow freely. I spend a lot of time, particularly today, trying to cross Milton Road on my bike to go off onto the side roads. So if I actually benefit when it's gridlocked or when the traffic lights are holding traffic. I'm sorry to say, because I spent absolutely ages this morning watching traffic continually flow slowly. So the more it gets like that, the more the traffic becomes a barrier in the middle of a residential area, from my point of view.
You're absolutely right, actually. But imagine what it's going to be like trying to cross four lanes of traffic, plus two cyclists. So, I mean, if that's the alternative, I don't see that as being attractive. I mean, it simply won't be possible to cross the road between traffic lights most of the day when it's 20 metres, when you've got to cross two cycle lanes, two bus lanes, and two traffic lanes. But there could come a point where we could actually put pedestrian crossings between the junctions, actually to encourage people to cross. And certainly, where we've got shops, that's an obvious place to have a zebra crossing. Actually, I mean, I know there's a pelican crossing just up the road from there. But once you've sort of brought traffic under control and you've reduced the volume of traffic, you have a lot more flexibility about how you interrupt it, because there is that much more capacity. At the moment, the priority is to keep the traffic moving, because there's no overflow space. There's no sort of balloon that the traffic can sort of, that you can store the traffic in. What we're proposing does provide you that, and once it's connected into the traffic management system, you can actually have you can regulate the flow of traffic much more flexibly.
Thank you very much. Edward, thank you.